So today we had another weekly Warriors Den live stream. And this one was a lot different than the past few weeks because it was expected to answer a bunch of questions regarding the actual gameplay. And it actually did answer quite a few questions. Nothing too in depth, but we did get a lot of info and transparency from Yubi. And I don't care what anyone says, it is a step in the right direction, even though everyone didn't hear what they wanted to hear. There's quite a bit to talk about in this video, so I'll start off by talking about what I thought was most important and work my way down while trying not to linger on anything for too long. And then towards the end of the video, I'll talk about how I felt about the dev stream as a whole. So let's not waste any more time and get right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is how Yubi addressed both Shugoki and Lawbringer. I think we all know by now that Shugoki was practically guaranteed some sort of buff in Season 9, and the devs basically confirmed it. What they said was that Shugoki will see some sort of improvement upcoming in Season 9. They didn't tell us, however, what the improvements would be. They sort of talked about why his unblockable isn't feightable after a certain point, but they didn't say exactly what the plan was. My guess is they'll probably remove that hyper armor, which slows down gameplay, and probably give him some sort of faster attacks. I think that they want to get rid of the trading playstyle and make him feel more powerful, but that's just me guessing. We'll have to wait a while before we get any real info. But on the bright side, he didn't get nerfed again. As for Lawbringer, they mentioned that they still believe that he's pretty strong in fours, like they said before, and he has a certain playstyle in duels, which is defensively. And as we all know, Lawbringer has some really good parry punishes, and he still has shove on block. In fours, he's got his bombs, and Impale and Long Arm have their uses in team fights. They talked about the differences in what their data showed versus what the community is saying, and it sort of sounds like they're probably going to focus on what the community is saying. They know that he can't open anyone up or play offensively, but we have no time frame on when any buffs are coming his way, and this may just be me being pessimistic, but it doesn't really sound like they know where they're going with Lawbringer, but they know that he needs some work. Next, let's talk about the one thing I wanted answered more than anything else, and that's whether or not we'll see more constant balancing or more constant updates, and it's looking like that answer is no. Yubi said that they're hesitant to buff and nerf heroes constantly. When they make a change, they want the change to be well thought out, and want to believe that whatever they did was the best decision. They don't want the game to become a game like, let's say, Fortnite, where things are constantly changing, and after one patch the game's great, and then after another the game is trash, which I admit is true. Too many updates for a game can ruin it, but I also think that taking too long or not updating the game enough makes it boring and stale. Now onto something that sorta didn't really come off the right way, and it's when Yubi talked about light spam. They talked about light spam at the top level like they did before, but they're talking about 500 millisecond lights, and I think that most of us agree by now that 500 millisecond lights aren't that big of a deal. I hardly see anyone outside of a brand new player complaining about a 500 millisecond light attack. While talking about this, they didn't say anything about the 400 ms lights. When we talk about light spam, we're talking about the 400 millisecond attacks, not the 500 millisecond attacks. They also didn't mention any of the Wulin heroes light attacks, which seemed to be the reason people even started bringing up light spam again. They again talk about tournaments, and they tell us to go play some tournaments or go watch some tournaments, and you'll see that light spam isn't a big deal. I think we all know that 400 millisecond light attacks are in the game because 500 millisecond lights don't work. And since they brought up all the tournaments and whatnot, I was really hoping they talk about spectator mode, because I think that would make a lot more people watch. Right now tournaments sort of suck to watch, but now that we know that Stefan and the fight team watches these tournaments, and Stefan said he does in his free time, we know that they have an idea of what's going on. They see that 500 millisecond lights are easily parried. He sees why Conqueror is so powerful. He sees how often Warden, Berserker, and Conqueror are picked. The only downside is that he hardly mentioned anything about these heroes. He sees that Conk relies on two things. He sees that Gladiator relies on one thing. He sees how great Warden shoulder bash is and whatnot. And I would have loved to see him address these issues directly, but in his defense, it didn't look like he knew what he'd be asked, and these topics are probably better suited for another show when he has a response prepared in advance and they can take time to, really go into detail with it. Revenge is something they also brought up, and I believe that they were spot on this one. They talk about how they also feel that revenge shouldn't really be earned in a 1v1 situation. And this is something I've been saying for a while now. It rewards you for losing a fight, and if you're using a hero who has a bash or a kick or something, all it does is feed more revenge to your opponent, so by the time you whittle their health down and get them weak, you have to deal with the revenge. And it really doesn't make sense and makes fights drag on for a long time. And while this may be great for someone who's stalling, it's really annoying for an attacker. They said that they're working on it, but again, just like everything else, there's no estimate on when changes will be rolled out. Now let's talk about Nusha and JJ. So unfortunately, we didn't hear anything about damage values or anything like that. Instead, we found out that they are in fact working on JJ's attack animations and how they hit you early. And we also found out that Yubi intentionally made Nusha's deflect not guarantee anything. It isn't an oversight, it's not a bug, it's actually a feature. And I'm a little shocked. They want her deflect to give her an advantage rather than have guaranteed damage. They want Nusha to have options from her deflect, which, I mean, sure, it makes sense, but every other hero who has a deflect basically has guaranteed damage. I do see where they're going with this, but I've accidentally blocked so many Nusha deflects, so I think that she should at least get a guaranteed 30 damage from it. That's just my opinion though, and I don't think Yubi has any plans on changing how it works. They didn't address her back-to-back 400 millisecond lights though, and they danced around her trap being easy to get away from, but they did say that they want the whole heavy feint or trap decision to be harder to read. So the bots in arcade mode are going to receive a nerf coming pretty soon. The whole dilemma they were facing was trying to make it to where bots weren't really annoying to fight against, but they also didn't want bots to be completely worthless when you're stuck with one on your team. And I mean, bots in Breach are already pretty worthless in my opinion. They do a good job at grabbing the flag, but sometimes they get stuck in the spawn or climb up and down ladders all day, and it's just pretty painful to watch. I know you all remember week 1 though of the arcade bots. They would just read your inputs and force you to play defense, and it was not fun. So they're going to try and tone down their perfect defense in this upcoming patch so that they're not such of a chore to fight against. But only in arcade mode, so our only strategy isn't to just try and ledge the bots whenever we can. I think this was a really good decision on Yubi's part. The rest of the Q&A had some interesting topics that I'll speed through. They don't want to do a global health buff or a light damage nerf because they don't want fights to be longer than they already are. I agree a bit on this, but I do believe that 400 millisecond lights should have a damage reduction. That huge white skull that appears on your screen and blocks your indicator while the enemy team is breaking is being worked on. They're working on another way to relay that information while not being so invasive. They want to limit the use of unlocked sprint attacks in 1v1. I'm sure you guys have been on the opposing end of a crashing charge mix-up or Shinobi slide tackle. They're even willing to just remove its utility with no compensation, which I'm 100% fine with. I don't think that any hero should be able to bypass the entire fight system by unlocking and running around. It looks really silly, and it isn't fun to fight against, although I think that the move should still be worth using in 4s. They also mentioned how they still want to work on Peacekeeper, since her reworked nerf hybrid set her back a little too far, in their opinion. They talked about minion kill animations for a bit, and it looks like we're not getting them back, mainly because the pikemen are multi-hit, and they didn't want heroes to be played in different ways or something, and that if you were using minion animations rather than zoning or locking, then you weren't being efficient. And I mean, I think we all knew that, but some people just like the animations because they look cool, and I mean, to me, it didn't really matter. It didn't affect the game at all. It would still be nice to see them in Dominion though. The dev stream as a whole was a good step in the right direction. It definitely wasn't perfect and didn't answer all the questions, but I mean, at least they were transparent. I am worried though about the pacing of the game still. You can be as transparent as you want, but actions speak louder than words, and it's pretty clear that people aren't playing this game as much as they did. I also think that Yubi sort of dropped the ball by not addressing the Wulin heroes or just marching fire. Sure, they talked about Nusha and Jang Jun for a bit, but they didn't talk about Tiandi or Shaolin. I would have loved to hear anything regarding those two, like if they thought that both of them were in a good state or not, or addressing the annoyances that they've brought to the game. And sure, you can say wait until next week when they talk about the State of Balance, but I don't think we'll be talking about the Wulin in a Season 7 State of Balance follow-up. I do think it's cool that they talked about set mixes, tier list, and tournaments though, because at least they're still looking over there and acknowledging the remains of the competitive community, and it'll be interesting to see how they compare their famous data to their tier list. Next week we'll also see another Q&A, which is always appreciated, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more about the future. The thing about pacing is sort of disappointing though. This whole let's put out important patches one season at a time thing is something people have been criticizing for a long time now, and to see that it probably won't be changing anytime soon sort of sucks, but at least we have a reason on why. I think that if UB is a lot more transparent more often, then a lot of the hate headed their way will die down. But again, I think that with this pacing, things really won't change. I'm also hoping that next season we get more than one rework or improvement, if you want to call it that. Again, maybe next week we'll hear more about the weaker heroes and UB's plans. I think the most important thing we got out of this though is that Shugoki is finally receiving a buff in Season 9. It's also been confirmed that this game is going to get even faster than it is now, even though we all knew that. They want to reduce reactability, which is exactly what it sounds like. They want less attacks to be reactable, because that makes for a turtle fest at higher levels. Whether you like that or not is up to you, but that's the path this game is heading down. They've made it really clear that they don't want anything to do with the defensive meta, which is cool, but I feel they also need to be careful with the way they go about it, because having a game full of unreactable attacks probably won't be too fun for many players, especially those who just play the game casually. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. I really didn't want to stretch it out for no reason. UB did say a lot about balance and whatnot, but without any dates or plans or details or anything, we don't really know what's going on. Again, I appreciate that today's show was better than the rest and gave us at least some insight into what's going on over there. Next week we'll probably receive more specific topics on heroes with the State of Balance pulled up, so I'm looking forward to that. But I do want to hear your opinion on this. How did you feel about today's Warrior Den? Did it clear everything up for you, or did it not answer anything you were interested in? Talk to me down in the comments. And as usual, if you agree with me or just like the video, feel free to leave a like and sub if you're new, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.